Good evening, everybody. It's great to have you here with us tonight. I'm Janice Kaminer-Resnick. Thanks so much for tuning in for the 59th consecutive week of America at a Crossroads programming. Tonight, we welcome Congress member Adam Kinzinger in conversation with Madeleine Brand. I want to thank my dear friend Larry Hochberg for helping introduce us to Congressman Kinzinger and team so that we could host him here tonight. We're all very excited to be here to honor your courage as well as to hear everything you have to say about the GOP. We have almost 5,000 people signed up to come into tonight's program, and I know they're continuing to enter as we introduce the program. For those of you who are newcomers to this weekly program, the weekly town hall series, we are a joint project of Jews United for Democracy and Justice and Community Advocates, Inc. Our leadership team members are Zev Yaroslavsky, Mel Levine, Rabbi Ken Chazen, Caroline Kelly, David Lehrer, and myself. And thank you to our many wonderful co-sponsors. Their names were all posted on the graphic before the program began. Reminder, if you unsubscribe to our emails, you obviously will not receive them. And that means you will not get timely Zoom links we send on usually on Tuesdays and Wednesdays at around noon. Eventbrite does send an email before our program, but it is often delayed for reasons that we don't understand and over which we have no control. If you unsubscribed and want to be put back on the list, just send me an email. You can do that by return email. Just hit reply to any of the emails you get from us. If you don't unsubscribe and you are not getting the emails, if you didn't unsubscribe and you still aren't getting the emails, look in your spam folder. We have lots of great programs coming up. I will just mention two of our July programs. Congressman Jamie Raskin, who was the lead impeachment manager this past January, and election law scholar Rick Hassan will be joining us on July 7th, a great way to celebrate right after Independence Day. And former chair of the Joint Chiefs, Admiral Mike Mullen, will be with us on July 14th, which will also be a wonderful, fascinating conversation, no doubt. And of course, nothing could be more timely than next week's program with famed author and Holocaust scholar Deborah Lipstadt and Rabbi Ed Feinstein to discuss the frightening rise in anti-Semitism. We hope that you'll register for all these programs early and that you'll join us and have your friends join us too. Now, to introduce tonight's program and speakers, please welcome my partner in crime, my colleague, my friend, David Lehrer.
Thank you, Janice, the indefatigable. And once again, I'm joining her and welcome you to America at a Crossroads. Tonight's a special evening. We get to hear from a headline maker who has lots to say, and what he has to say should have a special resonance with his audience. Congressman Adam Kinzinger, Republican from Illinois' 16th District. In 1956, John F. Kennedy wrote Profiles in Courage, a book in which he recounted the stories of American heroes who, at crucial times, risked their personal and public lives to do the one thing that seemed right. Representative Kinzinger is a present-day profile in courage. At great risk to his political career, he has criticized former President Trump's outrages. He voted for impeachment. He's called out the silence of many of his colleagues about January 6th. He urged that Marjorie Taylor Greene, the QAnon representative in Congress, be removed from the House, and much more. For taking these stands, he has become, as the New York Times reported, Trump's enemy number one. His family members have called him part of the devil's army, and he faces a district that is conservative, Trump-admiring, and likely to be reapportioned. He has demonstrated the same bravery he did as an Air Force pilot in the skies over Afghanistan and Iraq. Last night on CNN, Anderson Cooper asked him about the political risks he is taking. Kinzinger said, "If people at a very young age put their life on the line for this country, can't we put our career on the line for the same thing? What's it worth?" The congressman has a lot to say, and there is no one better to ask these questions than Madeleine Brand. She's the award-winning host of KCRW's daily noontime broadcast, Press Play. She's been a pleasure to work with all this past year. Madeleine?
David, thank you. Thank you, Janice. And it's great to be back with you all again. And it is my honor to interview the congressman today. I'm excited to hear what you have to say, since you are definitely a newsmaker and maybe a bit of a reluctant newsmaker. How do you feel about being in the news so much now as ex-President Trump's chief antagonist?
Hey, Madeleine. Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you. Everybody. Thanks for having me. It really is a big honor. When I was asked, I'm like, no hesitation. And my good friend Larry Hochberg, thank you for making that connection. And Janice and David, thanks for that kind intro. Yeah, it's a very interesting question because I've been in Congress now. This is my 11th year. And it's funny, you come to Congress and there's a formula that's out there now. Say something outrageous and crazy, become instantly famous. And there are people that like to do that. I don't think they put the interests of the country anywhere near their own. For me, I came out to Congress, 11 years ago, and you definitely at the beginning want to be a national figure, but it's really hard to do. It's hard to cut through if you're not insane. And about probably 5 years ago, I basically made the decision I don't want to be a national figure. I want to, focus on America's role in the world, helping my district, those kinds of things. But history has a way of kind of thrusting you in a moment. And unfortunately, I stand out right now because I'm one of the few saying the truth. And that's not any kind of a kudos to me. I appreciate the profiles and courage comment, but it's actually more of a profile and cowardice of a lot of other people. But look, it's certainly a different moment than I've experienced. And there are low moments and high moments, but mostly the thing I can proudly say is there are peaceful moments because I know no matter what the consequences, it's the right thing for the country.
Well, walk us through that moment or a series of moments, I suppose, that led you to decide, I am not going to be quiet, because I'm sure there are lots of your colleagues who share your thoughts, who think that the big lie is really the big lie, and yet refuse to say anything for fear of their political future. How did you decide, I'm actually not going to stay silent? Oh, what was the moment where you said, no, enough is enough?
So, when Donald Trump ran, I was a Jeb Bush guy. He was, obviously dispatched pretty early, and I made the litany of anybody but, and endorsing. And I decided in 2016 I can't support Donald Trump, and I didn't. But when he took office, I tried to say, okay, I'll do my best to work with him. He had interviewed at that time Mitt Romney, had generals in his cabinet. So there was a hope that maybe, yeah, he's going to be crazy in how he talks, but he can govern well. And obviously, we saw over the years that just declined. And in fact, I would argue that after that first impeachment, which I want to be very clear, if I could go back in time, quantum leap style, I would vote for it now, knowing what I know. But you saw that kind of degradation and that division, and that's what started to motivate me. I remember one particular, I'd always kind of spoken out on big things against him. I had that reputation. But I remember at one point there was a pastor, I think it was Robert Jeffries, that had tweeted something about an impending civil war almost. And Donald Trump retweeted that. That was an eye-opening moment for me. No president of the United States should ever do that. That is lives on the line. But the real defining thing was the day after the election. It's one thing to say somebody's crazy. They say stupid things. I hope we learned our lesson when we go back to elect future presidents on that. It is another thing to convince 74 million people that their vote didn't count, to convince them that the election was rigged. That's not just nuts. That's actually really dangerous to democracy. I started to see, we talk about anti-Semitism, and maybe we'll talk about this more, but, I started to see things like Kinzinger's a Jew. I'm not Jewish, but you start to okay, where's that come from? And you start to realize that anti-Semitism is being nurtured and it's being used. So I'll tell this quick thing. When I got elected, I think I'd just gotten back from Iraq. Hindsight, I would have waited a couple months, decompressed. But I remember really telling myself, look, I have to be willing to take a career-ending vote to do this job right and to be worthy of it. I thought that would be something like Social Security reform or some budget vote. I didn't realize it would be like actually defending democracy. But that's where in the introduction, I realized if there are people, I was in Iraq, right? I saw bodies. We had operations. I know I have a good friend here. Andreas O'Keefe was killed in March of 18. He gave his life for this country. For me to not be willing to give my job for the same cause makes me completely, in my mind, unworthy of the seat. There's a real if you've ever seen Band of Brothers, fantastic HBO documentary series. I remember there's this one scene with a lieutenant and a private. The private's admitted that he came in on Normandy and hid, and he was scared. And the lieutenant goes, "Private Blythe, we're all scared. Your problem is you have hope." He said, "Until you realize that you're already dead, you can't operate effectively as a soldier because all war depends on it." I'm not saying we shouldn't have hope. We should. There's a lot to be hopeful for. But in this job, you have to accept that you've already lost in order to be truly free to do the right thing.
So are you assuming that next year you will lose your seat? Are you assuming?
No, and I think I'll win. I'm not going to pretend like it's going to be easy. It's going to be one heck of a fight. But I am not going to relent on what I'm saying. The temptation, if you talk to any, and thankfully I don't hire these people on my campaign. It makes it easier. But if you talk to most campaign people, it's like, hey, you just need to be quiet now. You've made your point. Now let's focus on re-election. But to me, to be quiet at this moment, so truth and lies cannot coexist. They can't. You can't say, okay, well, for the sake of Republican unity, let's just allow people to say that January 6th was Antifa and still vote against the January 6th commission. I mean, the back and forth is crazy. I will not relent, and I recognize it's going to be hard. And the key is being willing to lose puts you in a position where you don't fear the consequences of doing the right thing.
Well, David alluded to the fact that you're even losing your members of your own family. This letter has been released, this 2-page letter that was sent to you by members, your cousins, I believe, members of your family, basically saying you're in cahoots with the devil's army, and that you're a disappointment to them and I guess to the country. And I suppose they're reflecting the larger problem in America, where you have this incredible split within the Republican Party. And I guess I'm wondering, because it is hitting so close to home, how you're thinking about that in your family and in the country, and how you can hope to repair this if even members of your own family think that you are in cahoots with the devil's army.
Marching, to the orders of the devil. Look, to me, it was a shocking letter to get. Obviously, I expected when I started to read it, maybe it's my dad's cousins. It's a whole big group of them, a slew of them. And the other, 11, 12 names that signed on to that were redacted. I didn't even release the letter. This is how angry that lady was, his cousin. She sent that, Karen Otto, she sent that so far and wide. It was not hard for the reporter to get it. Look, I read that. I was shocked. I had to read it 2 or 3 times. I was in real disbelief, because it's one thing to disagree. I have my more immediate family, which has been very supportive. For me, they disagree with me. Not my parents and stuff. They're good. But, I have cousins that think Donald Trump is, the coming savior, right? But they still love me. But to get that from somebody, and to realize that, personally as a Christian, to see the failure from the Christian pulpit to tell the truth. You see people out there saying, well, I prophesy that on January 6th, it's going to be Donald Trump. That is a failure. That is a failure of a religious institution. And when I read that letter, that I'm in the devil's army, that I've committed, it's funny, I've committed the cardinal sin, and I've lost the support of, Rush Limbaugh. Like, that's like the most stabbing thing, I guess. But I'm glad I got it. And I'm glad I got it because I think it revealed to the country, unintentionally by her and really unintentionally by me, the real issue. People that had a brother that they don't talk to anymore, or a dad, or whatever that is, did not realize how widespread this is, where we are choosing the religion of politics over the love of family. It hurt. I forgive them because I don't care, but I have no desire to ever talk to anybody that signed that letter.
Until they see the light, until they apologize, or that's it?
If they want to apologize, great. And I've already forgiven them in my heart. It's not like I want to repair that relationship. I mean, it's one thing, and probably many of you have experienced this. Maybe it's in, something outside of politics or business or whatever, but you get to a point where somebody is a friend or a family member, and you do something that has nothing to do with that love relationship, and they basically disown you over it. And for me to see that somebody would say, I disagree with how you vote in Congress, and so I'm willing to do that, it's like, those are people that you don't need in your life. And so I forgive them. I hold no animosity, but that's not a relationship I have a deep desire to repair.
But what you're talking about is a microcosm of what's happening in the country. I mean, we've got two sides who don't want to talk to each other. You have it, you see it in Congress, you see it in the broader body politic. So the very attitude, the very idea that I don't want to ever talk to you again because of what you've said and what you did, and you're in this corner and I'm in this corner. How then do we bring the country back? How do we bring bipartisanship back in Congress? Is it impossible at this point?
This is where I'm optimistic in the medium to long term. The near term is going to be rough. I truly believe, if I didn't believe this, honestly, I would have quit Congress 2 years ago and made more money and had an easier life. I truly believe that America, as Winston Churchill was attributed to saying, I don't know if he invented the quote, but Americans can be counted on to do the right thing after they've exhausted all other options. I also believe that political bubbles, so insanity in politics, it rapidly accelerates before it pops. And when it pops, it collapses. I hope that's the case here because it is rapidly accelerating in my party. And so I'm hoping that's the impending collapse coming. But the other thing is this, I've been doing a little study recently, casually, I guess, on is America really as polarized as people say it is? So, look, if everybody's assuming that since the Republican Party's way over here and the Democrats are here and we can't talk to each other, that people vote then that way, that is a reflection of the country. But I've seen some pretty compelling evidence that really Americans' opinions haven't changed much. Let's take the issue of guns. Everybody knows where they stand on guns, right? The Republican Party used to have, and I'm pro Second Amendment, but I have caveats. So I would be considered now a huge liberal, of course. But the Republican Party used to embrace people like Mark Kirk, who many of you probably know very well, who was actually for an assault weapons ban, wanted to limit capacity on guns, on magazines, but they embraced that. Now we don't. Now, if the guns is your biggest issue, you have to be a Democrat, and if the Second Amendment's your biggest thing you want to defend, you have to be a Republican. But people still are somewhere in between. I said we should raise the age to buy an assault weapon at least to 21 to match a handgun purchase. 88% of Americans agree with me. I voted for universal background checks. 90% of Americans agree with me. My party thinks I'm a rhino because of it. I say all that to say this. Rhino, you guys all probably know it. It's Republican in name only, even though I was a Republican far before Donald Trump. The parties have self-selected themselves to radicalization. And if you're an American, we live in a binary time where you just got to pick your poison. It's like every time, if Madeleine, if you and I went to dinner and we were offered chicken or beef, and you pick chicken, that doesn't mean you prefer chicken. It just means you don't like beef. And I think that's what we're seeing. I guess I'm a Republican because of this, Democrat because of that. So I don't think we're as polarized. And so I think the long-term game here is America is going to revolt against the current political system, not violently, but politically, because Americans cannot be unrepresented for as long as they feel they have been.
What do you mean revolt against the current political system? Can you be more specific? Do you mean the way that we run our elections and the way that we carry out our democracy?
I think so. I think, and I may be wrong, I'll be honest, I wouldn't put all my wealth on this bet, but there's a number of things we need to do. Right now within the political system, we have to operate with basically unlimited funds because that's the law. But I think Americans by and large say there is way too much money in politics. And we need to do something about that. Problem is that takes constitutional amendment, but the desire's there. I think the breaking up of families, the losing of friends, the fact that nobody has friends anymore that are outside of their political viewpoint, it is all everybody's engines on red line and they're about to break down. And we saw a stutter of that. I'm a pilot, right before you stall in any airplane, your plane shutters. And it says you're like 3 knots away from falling out of the sky. That's what happened on January 6th. And I think Americans will revolt with things like ranked choice voting, which is the best way to get around a destructive primary system, campaign finance reform, and quitting rewarding absolutely bat S-word crazy people from doing what they're doing by giving them money. I'm hopeful, but I can't
Do
give you
you
the
think,
formula because I don't know it all.
well, do you think there should be public financing of elections?
So I'm open to it. Right now, I would like to see not that. I'd like to see us fix a system where you don't have unlimited funds. But I also believe that there has to be some radical change, and that's something I'm certainly open to. I think the bottom line is we have gotten into these binary choices of things, and I would like to see all of us just be willing to put some of those aside and truly go for absolute change. And if that takes public financing, it's something I'm certainly open to talking about. Devil's in the details here. I don't want taxpayers funding all of that, of course.
Well, that's one aspect of HR 1, as you are aware, the For the People Act. And there are a lot of other aspects of that bill that would protect voting rights. It is the Democrats' #1 priority now, given what's happening in Republican-controlled state legislatures across the country, most notably Texas. You voted against it, right? Why?
Because I'm still, so here's where I think we get kind of trapped in these discussions is, so I'm out there saying the Republican Party's lost its mind. We need to come back to, calm, country first type principles. I don't give up my conservative viewpoints though. I guess I'm fairly moderate. I would call myself a moderate Republican. But the way that bill was written to include things like nationalizing elections, which I actually think, frankly, having the thousands of different jurisdictions we do in an election system actually makes us the most secure system. Because can you imagine if we had basically, in essence, a nationalized election and we had any indication of a hack, or could you imagine what that would go into? So the other thing is, Republicans were never even asked their opinion on anything. That was used as a bludgeon against us. So it doesn't mean I'm against stuff that's in there, all of it. I certainly am open to discussing those points, but I still have opinions and I still have to vote on that basis.
When you say nationalizing elections, are you referring to the part in the bill where it sets aside a day, a national holiday, as a voting day?
No, I think it's where, and I have to apologize. I haven't read the bill again in probably about 4 months. So, the penguins on the iceberg, they start to make room for other new penguins. But there was just a lot of concern in terms of who has actual final control over that. There were some issues with Supreme Court rulings and things like, voting rights issues, which has nothing to do with saying we want voter suppression by any means. It had to do with things that even Ruth Bader Ginsburg had concerns with when she was alive. But let me talk about the broader voting rights issue. The first thing to celebrate, okay, before I get into the negative, the first thing to celebrate is it is much easier to vote in the United States now than it has ever been. The problem is my party. So I think there was a little bit of overreaction from the left on the Georgia law, calling it, Jim Crow too. But the reality is this. Why were they pushing that? Why is Texas doing what it's doing? And I haven't read the Texas bill, but it's all a tacit acknowledgement in their mind. It's a tacit kind of bone to the base that the election was stolen and we need to make sure this doesn't happen again. We all want voting systems that are easy, that anybody that's eligible to vote can vote in, that anybody that's not eligible to vote in can't. But what they're doing, and especially with this timing, is again, it's a bone to the base. The election was stolen. We're going to make sure it doesn't happen here. That is really dangerous.
Or it could be looked at as a fig leaf for people who wanted to do that anyway, and to preserve their power and to exclude people who might not vote with them.
Certainly.
And gin up this paranoia that the election was stolen and that this was the plan all along.
I want to add to that too, which is, so as Republicans, the idea that we should make it harder to vote or whatever it is, how about this? If I'm speaking to a fellow Republican, how about we just go out and win hearts and minds, right? Why am I a center-right Republican? Well, I personally believe that we should give equal 30 miles north of where I live is the south side of Chicago. You're more likely to be shot and killed there than you are in Kandahar, Afghanistan. You know, people born there should have the same opportunity as a kid born in the richest suburb. And all the stuff we argue about is just about tactics to get to that end state. But instead of that hard work of going back to the basics and talking about our philosophy and winning hearts and minds to it and engaging in intellectual debate, it's far easier if you start tweeting about how masks are the equivalent of wearing a yellow star, because that stokes outrage. Culture war is easy. Hard work is legislating and convincing people.
Right. So I guess I still want to prod you more on HR1, because it seems that, at least on the part of the Democrats, their solution to all this is to enact national federal legislation, which HR1 would be. And so why not support it? Even if you have a few misgivings about certain aspects of it, the overall aim of the bill seems to be to allow more people to vote and to take away a lot of these restrictions that the states are imposing.
Look, the aim of the bill can be that. That bill was written in, at least in terms of how we had seen it, so quickly and dropped on us. I'm sure they had been working on it. And again, the public financing, as I mentioned, I'm open to that as a discussion. I'm not here saying I support that right away, putting the taxpayers on the bill to run our elections. That's something that I think merits discussion, but that's not something you rush into. The problem we get into right now, and the reason that I get worried that this is going to be tougher to fix as a political system, we should still embrace the right to disagree on issues. Because as the old saying goes, which I recently actually learned, but I guess it's old, you know, conservatives can pull liberals back when necessary. Liberals can pull conservatives forward when necessary. We need healthy disagreement. What we don't need is the continuous attacks on people as people and the demonization and dehumanization that comes with it. So we can have a disagreement on that. And shut down. That's just the beginning of how do we get to the table and actually deal with these large issues.
Are you having these discussions in the halls of Congress, in your private one-on-one conversations, either with members of your own party or members of the Democrats?
Yeah, sometimes. Look, this last year has been tough in Congress because we don't see each other. It's basically like everybody's experienced out there. A lot of our hearings have been virtual. We don't see each other much. We're just starting to get back to that. That's been damaging because, you know, human interaction, particularly in this job, is essential. And frankly, what happened on January 6th, quite honestly, destroyed a lot of relationships, understandably. And so, yeah, those conversations have happened. I'm not going to tell you I've been sitting around 8 hours a day talking to people about how best to do this, but certainly on the subway ride or sitting on the floor of the House, we have had conversations, me and Democrats mostly, saying, this is a system that's broken and we got to fix it.
You're mainly talking to Democrats?
Yeah, mostly, because you know, there's some Republicans that'll shake their head in agreement, but the truth is this is something that's going to have to be done in a bipartisan way. So in terms of wanting to solve things, me sitting around and talking about this with fellow Republicans so that we can put out some bill that they want, it's going to go nowhere. What we need to do is figure out where there's common ground. But I had to tell you, yes, that happens. But we also in Congress deal with about 1 or 2 bajillion more issues as well. So there's only limited bandwidth that we can find.
But is this the conversation that people are having? Are they talking about anything else besides this? It seems to be overshadowing at least the conversation in the media.
Yeah, I think, you know, election integrity, yes, this is overshadowing. I don't know if those are the conversations we all have necessarily behind the scenes, because I can't overstate enough how much we just haven't been talking to each other. But yeah, I mean, certainly it's something, but I mean, the idea that there's going to be, when we have some in my party using this as a de facto, the election was stolen, it's going to be hard to see how we solve it right now. But any of these big things take time. First thing we have to do as Americans, though, and as politicians, is just learn to get back to actually having respectable grown-up adult debates, or nothing will be fixed.
So if your party does regain control of the House next year, and it looks like Kevin McCarthy would be the presumptive speaker, you've said you wouldn't support him. Who do you think is a viable leader for your party?
So if I say names, it'll probably tank them. So it'll be the people I want. So, you know.
Well, you're that radioactive?
At the moment, yes. Look, I'd love to see Liz Cheney, but, you know, the idea that in the next year and a half, you know, there's going to be such a massive, you know, unanimous support for her. I pray that is the case. I doubt it. There are a lot of good people out there that I think can play the role of fair speaker and telling the truth. That's the key. Why is it that I have said I won't support, at least today in the current state, you know, short of a mea culpa, an acknowledgement of what happened, Kevin, is because our party's lying to the American people. We're lying about what happened on January 6th, and those that are silent are lying by their omission. I mean, had we on January 6th, 7th, basically come to full grips with what happened, kind of like waking up on a Saturday morning after drinking a couple bottles of wine and saying that happened, that shouldn't have happened, and we're going to change our lifestyle. And then Trump is persona non grata, I think we'd be in a much different place as a party. But instead, what we're forced to do as a party is to double down on Donald Trump because we're alienating so many people. We desperately need his aggressive supporters and his financial fundraising. The tailwinds are with the Republicans to take the majority. The historical tailwinds, the fact that it's so close, redistricting, all that. I think a sane Republican Party probably will have, if we do take the majority, will have taken it much larger than we probably will. I don't know. It's a year and a half away. But yeah, we're in a mess.
Have you ever considered switching parties?
No. Look, I'm not a Democrat, and I have a lot of Democratic friends. I respect them. I believe that they believe what they're saying, just like they know I believe what I'm saying, but it doesn't line up with generally most of my philosophies. And I'm not going to switch parties, but what I will do is recognize that this country needs two healthy parties, and my party is unhealthy. And I will fight because I've been a member of this party probably 10 times, even though I'm young, longer than Donald Trump. And I'll go to battle for it. And I'll also work, you know, I started this movement, Country First, country1st.com. I would encourage people just to go look, because I put out videos just telling the truth. And that's my goal out here, is to restore conversation with people and to just tell the truth, because I think people desperately want the truth told to them.
You were a member of the military in the Air Force. There are not a few members of the military in some of these, or former members in some of these right-wing groups like the Oath Keepers, many of whom were part of the insurrection. Members of the military, part of the insurrection. What is your response to that? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's really disheartening. So I still serve in the Air Guard. I still fly. In fact, tomorrow I'm leaving to fly for a couple days. And I'm proud of my service. I love the military. And the vast majority of people in the military understand their constitutional duty. That's why when you have crazy people like Mike Flynn say we need a coup, it is important for us to call that out aggressively, because that begins like the conversation that can really go bad. But I don't doubt that the military won't have a coup, because they know what their oath is. What I really am concerned about is, over time, every institution of the government has been delegitimized or politicized. Who would have thought 4 years ago that the CIA and FBI would be political, right? So it is not crazy to think that the military will be politicized, and it already is. So where I'm disappointed, not just in the fact that brothers and sisters in arms participated in an insurrection against their country, I'm disappointed that it reflected so badly upon so many people that have given so much, including their lives, for this country. You know, the other thing to keep in mind too, and it's not taking the blame from anybody that was there January 6th, but in a time where there's so much information, and you know this in the media, there's so many different sources coming in, and people are confused. They just sometimes sit, and this is how authoritarians rise. They sit back and go, I don't know what I believe, so I'm going to pick somebody I trust and believe everything they say. That's why Donald Trump is seen as infallible. When you have the people that these folks there on January 6th trust, you know, what members of Congress, talk show hosts, the president, the former president, it's kind of hard to, it's easy to understand how they believe they were doing something righteous. And that's why it's so important for us to tell the truth. You know, if truly the government was run by Satanist pedophiles, which is what QAnon was pushing, if truly that was the case, everybody would be up in arms. That's why it's important for us to tell people the truth. So the military side of it, really disappointing. We don't want to take away anybody's ability to have a political opinion, to have a belief in the military, but and they've done a better job in terms of talking about extremism in the military. We need to make it clear that if you're a member of Oath Keepers, for instance, that's the equivalent in my mind of being a member of a communist organization or a terrorist organization, both of which are questions when you join the military that are disqualifying.
So, yeah, I'm wondering, you've been, talking about this a lot in the media. You're here tonight. Your whole mission, if you will, is to convince people about January 6th and Donald Trump and the big lie and all of that. Have you changed any hearts and minds? Have you seen any success, any fruits from your labors?
I don't know. I mean, yes, there's been hearts and minds changed, I think. It's part of a broader effort of the few of us that actually speak out. I'll tell you, the Country First movement, we've had over 50,000 people join. We're getting ready to launch 22 college campuses or college chapters. There's a lot that's actually pending that's happening there. But all I know, because look, I'm not going to sit here and tell anybody, because you would be able to read right through it, that, I alone can do this. I can't. And that's why I'm out being so outspoken, is making the point that if you're in the silent majority of people, I truly believe the silent majority that's not buying any of the crap, right? Whether you're right, left, center, whatever you're at, it can't be people just like me. It's got to be all of us together. And it's why I'm trying also to get through this idea that, yes, look, I'm a conservative, I'm center right. Let's not focus at the moment, not because I don't want to be held accountable. I certainly do, and I can defend my positions. But if democracy is truly at threat, for a moment, let's be able to put aside a difference on a tax rate or a difference on something and focus on defense of democracy. And I think, I think that's going to catch fire. And if it doesn't, I'll be at peace, because I will have done everything I know to humanly do to do that.
Do you want to run for president?
It's not something I'm chasing. It's not something I'd ever rule out. If no, I would have said 6 months ago, no, no, but there's nobody else out there except a few people saying the things I am. And so I don't want to say
on your side, on the Republican
on our
side.
side. Yeah. That are out there just saying the truth. That position has to be represented. So that's not what I'm plotting, not what I'm planning, but I'm gonna leave it all on the line. I'm gonna put it all on the line so that I can walk off the field bloody, battered, exhausted, and know that I did everything I could.
Has anyone approached you about running?
No, those are, anything like that, obviously I'm not gonna, reveal or talk about, but no, there's nothing being plotted or planned. But I also, like I said, I'm going to leave this field bloody, battered, and at peace, and hopefully victorious. We'll see.
Okay, we have gotten to this portion of our program where I'm going to pose some of the questions from the audience. Lots and lots of questions, which have been sent to me on my cell phone. So I'm going to look down and look at that for a second. So Elliot asks, do you believe General Michael Flynn for his comments at that QAnon convention? Do you think he should be indicted for sedition?
Yes. I'll plead ignorance on the details of the law. So technicalities, I said that if it's possible, I don't know if he has a pension from the military, since technically he's been pardoned, but I think the military should pull his pension. Yes, right. And this is where generals particularly, go be a contributor on TV. That's great, but do it. If you're going to be political, please don't put general in front of your name and then go into politics. just be Michael Flynn, for instance, right? Or if you want to put general in front of your name, maybe talk about military issues. I think he should be prosecuted with whatever we can prosecute him with. I don't know if he violated the law technically, but my goodness, that's really scary.
Mary Beth asks, President Biden asked the Republicans to come to the table to negotiate legislation, but McConnell opposes any success for the administration. He's actually said he will oppose this administration wholeheartedly. I don't know what his exact quote is, but he's basically going to act as he did with President Obama, just obstruction, obstruction, obstruction. What do you think of that? And what do you think President Biden should do? President Obama issued a lot of executive orders out of frustration.
I think it's dumb as a party, as a leader, to put that as your highest priority. Your highest priority is a better country. And again, there's going to be legitimately kind of big, broad differences of opinion that you may not be able to negotiate. But there are areas we can. I'm seeing some, maybe light. This morning I was pessimistic on infrastructure. I'm a little more optimistic. That'll probably whipsaw 8 different times in the next 2 days. So I think there's areas like that. But what the problem is, when you sit around and you say our highest goal is to deny somebody a victory for their reelection, we have to be fair. It's happened, on both sides. But I'm a big believer that if you have a plank in your eye, you need to remove that before you point out the speck in somebody else's. So our goal as a party should be to make American lives better. It should not be to simply own the Dems, own the left, and win. We can win if we are grown-up, mature adults trying to govern for the American people.
We just saw an election in Israel where competing parties decided to come together and oust Netanyahu. An unusual, to say the least, coalition. Someone had said it's as if Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez got together with Mitch McConnell. So do you think something like that could happen here, that you would have this kind of a coming together of very disparate forces to enact change, substantive change?
I think it's possible. I think, when you look at, I don't know whether it's going to be, the budget's probably going to force some pretty structural change eventually that we're going to have to deal with. How, whether it's an issue on how Congress operates to bring it, to modernize it, government, stuff like that, or whether it's just a connection in terms of how we're doing politics and how we're treating each other. Yes. Now, granted, we have nothing near a parliamentary system, so I think the actual mechanics are not going to be similar. But I do think it's interesting. People always said, we've had 2 parties, we have 2 parties. I actually would argue to an extent we used to kind of have more than 2 parties, because you used to have conservative Democrats, liberal Democrats, conservative Republicans, liberal Republicans, moderate Republicans, and they may have all been under the same banner, but they all were able to kind of cross and make coalitions because both parties had big tents. And right now that they have self-selected to radicalization, you don't have that. So I do think that kind of thing is possible. But I'll tell you that to the extent I've paid attention to the details of Israeli elections, that has been a brutal process in the last couple of years.
Yeah, it really has. Well, it does raise the issue of a third party. Is that something you've considered, or at least making a very strong run as an independent? So
my focus is to save the Republican Party, because like I said, I will not cede ground to somebody that was a usurper and just joined. But I'll say, if this doesn't change, if people continue to radicalize, if people feel unrepresented that think like me, then I think that is a next logical, rational step, not anywhere in the near future. But because keep in mind, in the United States, the barrier to entry for independence in a different party is so high. In Illinois, for instance, when I run again, I think I'll have to get like 1,500 signatures. If you run as an independent, it's like 10,000. So it's a very different barrier.
Speaking of interlopers, I guess, what should the Republican Party do with Marjorie Taylor Greene?
Oh, man. So I always find myself at conflict between, giving her attention and not. But we just have to recognize, and I recognize, If her job is to go and be famous and be a force, she totally succeeded. And she is a force in the party. And I have said, I voted actually with the Democrats to remove her from committee because I thought that there's no way she should be serving on a committee after all the things she's said and done. And then the secondary thing is, I said, as Republicans, you can't stop somebody from calling yourself a Republican because there is a process to get on the ballot as a party, but we don't have to accept her in the conference. Kevin McCarthy said when the idea of the Jewish space laser stuff came out, he said, well, that was all before she was in Congress. Let's judge her by what she does in Congress. Well, okay, let's judge her by what she does in Congress. And it's just silence besides maybe a tweet. I think we should ban her from calling her from being a member of the Republican conference. And so she can call herself a Republican. We need to make it clear she's not in our eyes. It's not going to happen.
What's in it for McCarthy to tacitly support her?
The speakership. He made a decision that the raising of the money is important. He made a decision that he would not be able to take on, those kinds of forces and heal the party in time to need those votes. They're going to turn against him anyway. I think that's the worst kept secret in DC. But I think it's all about that. And look, in his mind, I think he can rationalize it by saying, when I become speaker, then I can change the direction of the party. Let me tell you, I don't look like an old guy, but in politics terms, I kind of am. I've been around enough to know that you're not going to have that kind of power.
Because why? There'll just be another QAnon group that will undermine you? I mean, a la Eric Cantor and the Tea Party?
Yeah, look at the whole Freedom Club, the Freedom Caucus. Look at the Marjorie Taylor Greens, look at, great people that when they came to Congress were really deep thinkers that are now all in on this crazy. There is a lot of pressure when these outside groups or whatever start sending the emails, tell Adam Kinzinger to vote for Marjorie Taylor Greene for speaker. And then you get all these calls, right? There's a lot of pressure on that. And I think if Kevin believes that he can become speaker, let's say he can, let's say he's got the numbers to get there, and he thinks he can then turn on the people that put him there, that buy all this stuff, or think it's good politics, and lead the party a different way, he can't. The only way the party is going to be led a different way is not a decision I make. It's not a decision McCarthy makes. Honestly, it's not even a decision that Donald Trump makes. It's a decision that the people that vote for it and call themselves Republicans make, which is why I think it is so important that this idea of let's paper over our differences and feign unity right now is actually capitulation and not unity, because the people that vote this way deserve to hear the truth, even if we're airing our dirty laundry, because they're the ones that make that determination, not the 200 of us sitting on Capitol Hill.
Have you been personally, physically threatened?
Yeah, I mean, I don't fear much, and but certainly there's that out there. I don't think it's been as bad as maybe what it's kind of been considered in the media. Also a vague threat to me, for instance, I recognize as a vague threat. I think people that are kind of new in the danger game a little bit, rightfully so. It probably seems a lot bigger. I've been to war, and but I will say, wherever I go, I'm armed, and if I need it, I'll have security. And it's unfortunate that there are people that fear voting a certain way because they fear for their physical safety. Like, that shouldn't be the case here. That's what happens in banana republics, not in the United States of America.
So fellow members fear that they will be physically harmed? Certainly. Members of Congress?
Yeah, certainly. I've heard from people that worry about that. I haven't heard from anybody that said, for instance, I can't vote for impeachment because I fear for that. But I've heard from a lot of people that fear, that they'll get real threats. You think about it, in a country of 380 million people, there are people that are unstable, that look at Hollywood or politics as their religion. And, if you're out there saying something that makes them mad, they can move on it. But look, I feel well protected by my creator, and I feel well protected by the peace I usually carry wherever I go.
Do you have your gun on you right now?
It's very nearby.
Okay. So you do favor concealed carry?
I do. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
And without getting into, because we're running out of time, a whole debate on gun laws and gun control, we did touch on it a little bit, but we have seen an incredible rash of mass shootings,
Hmm.
hundreds of them, 600, I believe, just this year. And there's also been an incredible increase in the proliferation of guns since the pandemic began. And so I know that you're very strong on gun rights and the Second Amendment, but how can you de-link those two, the proliferation of guns and mass shootings?
Well, I think it's a great question. Mass shootings obviously is a huge issue we have to get a grip on. But yeah, there is a massive amount of guns out there, the vast majority of which are never used in the commission of a crime. Now, that's not to kick that away. It's to say, for me personally, in 2006, I was on a street in Milwaukee and a guy was murdering his girlfriend with a knife, and I had to fight him with a knife. I was unarmed and I should have died. I would fight a person with a gun in a heartbeat before I'd fight somebody with a knife, because that's lethal everywhere. Thankfully, I survived and disarmed him, not based on any, awesome special forces training, but based on, frankly, luck. And that's when I became a big advocate for somebody who is well-trained and well-vetted to be able to conceal and carry a weapon. What I don't believe is that anybody should just carry a weapon that's never had training. I think go get training, understand what happens to your body, understand the physical reaction, because you have to be well-vetted. On things like, the broader issues, I think here's where we need to start. Essie Cupp is a friend of mine, and she was doing a show once, and she goes, we have got to get out of our corners. Republicans have to stop saying it's only a mental health issue. Democrats have to stop saying it's not a mental health issue, it's a gun issue. It's actually both. How do we keep guns out of the hands of those that shouldn't have it? Maybe people have different prescriptions and we should go further with it. But if we can find areas maybe that we can agree on and actually move and get action, shouldn't we do that? Instead, what happens is we don't. Republicans fear the slippery slope. Democrats fear that if they go with a little thing, they're never going to get anything more. We don't trust each other. Look, I believe in red flag laws. I believe that if in most states you have to be 18 to buy an AR, let's at least make it 21. I was the first member of Congress, I think even before any Democrat, to call for banning bump stocks, because I shot him. And I woke up that morning after Vegas shooting and I knew exactly what that was. That's the way, because what happens is if somebody says, and not to me, because I've made a decision, I'll stand alone. But if somebody says, yeah, but you don't want to jump in and ban ARs, so therefore you're just like the rest of them. This is why people just pick a tribe and stick with it, because they're like, well, fine. If nobody believes anything I say, I'll find the tribe that I fit in and I'll just believe everything they say. We can get a conversation on guns and mental health. We just have to have the courage to do it.
Okay, Carol asks, do you think another January 6th is possible?
Absolutely, yes. I believe that it is not only possible, it could potentially be probable, because there are still people that believe now, including, I hear the president, former president, that he will be president in August again. You see the proliferation of misinformation on the internet. You see people downplaying what it was. It's interesting to me because, the riots in Portland against the federal court facility that went on for months, right? You'd see Republicans, including myself, that believes you have to defend that courthouse. You can't let people in and burn it down. I think most Americans agree with that. But then you see some people that hypocritically say, Congress is a free and open building. How is that trespassing? Oh, you know what? Congress is free and open, but it is not something you can walk into armed. It is not something you can walk into with bad intent. And you cannot disrupt the people's business because you're throwing a temper tantrum. I think January 6th is quite likely to happen again, something similar, because you have people like Senator Ron Johnson saying it was hugs and kisses and nothing else. By the way, there were a lot of guns there, but the law enforcement couldn't arrest anybody because they were too busy trying to live and defend the Capitol to put somebody in handcuffs, detain them, and read them their rights.
And we still really don't know why the National Guard wasn't activated as soon as it should have been. We don't know a lot of things about that. And that was what the January 6th commission was supposed to be. So how are we going to find out and get to the bottom of what happened?
Oh, we will. History has a way of revealing these things, I think. I really think a lot of information is going to come to light as these court cases proceed that the FBI has. You see, for instance, I think it's an oath keeper that actually has cut a deal with the government. Oath keepers are going to be just dismantled like the KKK was, I think, in the 1920s. And so that stuff will come to fruition. I think we're going to have revelations of that kind of stuff, but this needs to happen in Congress. Here's a question. Senator Cassidy, who I served with in the House, and I've really grown to respect in the Senate. He said, do Americans trust a bunch of politicians on a committee getting to the bottom of January 6th, or a bunch of former politicians with no skin in the game that have a real fondness for the Capitol and democracy? We all know the truth to that. We all know that that's the best thing. Republicans negotiated this deal, which is very fair. And it's not going to be long that we're going to be able to resist this. Something will end up, I think, getting formed, or there'll be a committee or whatever, but we're going to know a lot, particularly in these court cases.
Just long term, though, what we've been dancing around is a deep vein of suspicion and unhappiness with the way things are in the United States, with a large swath of the population. And it didn't just start with Trump, and it didn't just start on January 6th. It's been burbling for a long, long time. One of the things you've just said is we need to get money out of politics. But taking another step back, what do you think it is about America that is so deeply disappointing and dissatisfying to so many people that they are willing to support some form of insurrection?
It's a long answer. I'll boil it down to really short, as short as I can. It is people that have never seen violence that fetish for violence. This fetishing of, look, I'm a huge Second Amendment supporter, as we've discussed. I don't go out bragging about displaying, putting in my campaign ads, all my guns, trying to be cool. Because to me, I have guns not to go out and be cool and to commit violence. For me, it's a defense of me and my wife. And there's so many people that fetishize that have never seen violence in their life. The people that have seen violence in the war that are doing that, they're brainwashed. They're searching for a purpose. Some of them may be just psycho, quite honestly. But the other thing, it's kind of the burden of having it all, right? We're a country that we're not worried about China invading us. We're not worried about Russia invading us. Canada's not, Mexico's not. We really don't fear for our safety on a macro level. There's real issues in cities and all this kind of stuff, and in the country, we don't fear that. We have any information we want right here. You want to know any facts, you got it. I can talk to you on a video. It's like Back to the Future 2, which I never thought would happen. We have everything. What we don't have is the drama that we like to create as humans. And there are people that are all too willing to exploit that. Look, we all have an epic battle in our hearts every day. There's darkness in our hearts and there's lights, and you have to actively fight to have the light overtake the darkness. But when somebody with authority speaks the dark part of your hearts to you, it gives you permission, and it's really comfortable and feels really good to let that overtake you. I think that's what's happened. But the truth is, we live in the best time in the world. We are still the best country that's ever existed. And other times when we've been in similar situations, maybe nothing quite like this, we have always overcome into a whole new decade or future or generation of American leadership. I did a call this morning with the 3 Cs initiative, Eastern Europe. And I just said that, after living behind an iron curtain, the 3rd generation of people to see American values on TV, radio, books, tore the iron curtain down and demanded freedom. That's what we represent. That's why it's important that we stand, with our partners, with our friends, why we're clear about the red lines that our enemies can't cross, but we work to bring the community together and export American values. That's why that's very important.
All right, so we'll end on that up note. I want to thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a fascinating conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, and I appreciate the invite. It's great to talk.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And thank you all for joining us. Please come back next Wednesday when Professor Deborah Lipstadt will be in conversation with Rabbi Ed Feinstein on anti-Semitism today. I'm Madeleine Brand, and thank you so much for joining us. Have a great rest of your evening.